Hello and welcome back to another episode of NF2 and you. Thanks for watching again today, guys and girls. Today we are absolutely thrilled to be joined by qualified occupational therapist Jo Southall from JG Occupational Therapy. Welcome, Jo. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, totally brilliant to see you. Now, I'm going to dive straight in because occupational therapy is one of those things that people they go, oh, yeah, I know, well, I've heard of occupational therapy. And people aren't really quite sure what it is. And I think there's this kind of misconception that it's something work-related because it's got the word occupation in there. So my first question, Jo, really is, can you break it down for us? What is occupational therapy?
Absolutely. They train us for this at university, because nobody knows what it is that we do. So occupational therapists are found everywhere from primary schools to prisons these days. Our kind of mission in life is to enable occupation, but also to use occupation for its own health benefits. So I normally give examples because they're easier to understand. So it may be that I've got somebody that I'm working with who is struggling to access the outdoors because of poor mobility. So it may be that I help them with their mobility with advice, or we talk about places they can go that are more accessible so that they can access the outdoors. And that in turn is really great from a mental health perspective. So they start to feel better from doing whatever it is that they're doing. So occupation for OTs is literally any task, anything, whether it's self-care, whether it's painting, whether it's, getting dressed in the morning. Occupation is everything, not just work.
And I know in my experience in the past, when I'm at a hospital and I'm sort of describing to my team about difficulties that I'm having in every day, and they usually will say, okay, well, we'll talk to your physiotherapist. And so I think there's this kind of uniform confusion about, well, what's a physio and what's an OT? What is the difference between that?
In a hospital setting, it's fairly easy. They wear blue and we wear green. No, it's not that simple. Physiotherapy is often more biomechanically focused and more medically focused. So you might look at somebody as a physiotherapist and say they're struggling to do this task because they've got muscle weakness on one side, or because their posture is bad, or because they've got knee pain because of an injury. Whereas me as an OT, I might look at that person and go, I can see they've got knee pain. It must be really impacting their ability to stand up long enough to cook, or their ability to walk around the office, or maybe the pain itself is keeping them up at night. So my focus will always be on how whatever the challenge is impacting their lives, rather than, whether we can fix it with exercises or otherwise. A lot of the people I work with aren't the kind of people that are fixable in the traditional sense, but that doesn't mean we can't make improvements and make their lives easier.
And I think one of the things that I've always sort of in my mind seen OTs as is almost like the solutions people. So like if I work with a physio as an example, that may help me improve sort of muscle strength. I'll give an example. So I have nerve damage in my arm. So the physical strength is something that I've worked on with PTs, but they've not been able to support me in a way that OTs have in actually making daily tasks easier. So holding a knife, or gardening, or all these things that I enjoy doing, and they don't, for me in my experience, they don't kind of give that this is how you can make those things better. It's just, right, we'll give you exercises, do your exercises, off you go. So it's almost, tell me if I'm wrong here, but is it almost like not cause and effect? That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, like, physiotherapists will look at what's caused something, and you will look at how you can improve the the sort of well-being of those impacts, really. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And in an ideal world, everyone would get both an OT and a physio, because physiotherapy definitely has its place. If you can build your muscle strength up to the point where you no longer find tasks challenging, that's fantastic. But from my perspective, in the short term, that's still 6 months to a year of you not being able to open jars on your own. So it's not the complete solution, it's part of the solution. So it may be that while you're working on building your strength, or while you're recovering, and while you're doing all the rehab stuff, I would also recommend some adaptive gardening tools. And we'd also talk about managing fatigue. And we would talk about whether compression gloves are useful for improving your grip, how to get in and out of food packages when you can't pinch or pull. There's a lot to be said for improvements with rehab, but there's also a lot to be said for actually how are you coping in the short term. And if, hopefully this isn't the case, but if there isn't much that rehab can do in terms of getting function back, how are you going to cope long term?
So almost like the adaptability side of things, really. And I mean, I know, obviously I've given an example of my description, and there will be so many people watching this who will go, well, that doesn't really apply to me at all. I mean, in what circumstances might someone be referred to an OT, or might they seek support from an OT?
OTs come in 1,000,001 different flavors, talents, and skill sets. There are specialist OTs who work almost exclusively on can fit grab rails to your house. There are OTs who can teach you techniques to get dressed one-handed, or how to navigate around a kitchen when you can't see your surroundings particularly well, or how to cope with chronic fatigue, how to deal with pain without relying on medication. There's so much out there. Some of the most challenging things I've had have been completely like, I never thought I'd be doing this as an OT, but things like coping with your inability to regulate body temperature, ways to stay cool or stay warm when you're not the right temperature you need to be. Adaptive exercise. I've got a network of friends and colleagues from different professions now who've come up with laying down exercise routines for people who need to get fit but can't be upright at the same time. There's so much out there. I think there's a lot of the most commonly seen OT is around adaptations to your environment. So grab rails, stair lifts, small gadgets and gizmos to get you in and out of the bath or to help you in the kitchen. But there's so much more to it that, pretty much whatever the challenge is, I think OT can help you part of the way.
It's almost like, let's see what you're having difficulty with, and I'll just let you know all of the solutions I can get for it. I mean, when I think about the adaptation side of things, there are so many people who may experience difficulties, and it may be something for them is seemingly small issue. Maybe they're just struggling a little bit with opening jars, or maybe they're struggling a little bit with balance and falling over, and so they may kind of think, well, I don't really need support in those things, do I? Do you get many clients like that?
The vast majority of the people I work with have some kind of variability within their health, so they don't have fixed symptoms from day to day. The difficulty with that is that on days where you feel pretty good, it's very easy to convince yourself you don't need or deserve support the rest of the time. Using myself as an example, I have a very nice, very expensive wheelchair downstairs. I don't always use it. I also have a very nice, very expensive pair of crutches. I don't always use those. But when I do need them, I have them. So I can go on about my life regardless of whether or not I can walk in a straight line or get across the road on my own. My ability to have fun, my ability to work, my ability to engage with my environment, with my friends and my family is not dependent on my body being cooperative. I often talk about building a toolkit with my clients. So what you're looking to do is to have a network of people, of healthcare professionals, of coping strategies, of skills, of pieces of equipment, of aids and adaptations, so that whatever your body throws at you on any given day, you are prepared for every possible scenario. So that left field surprise symptom that used to completely ruin your day now has considerably less of an impact because you've already got a solution in place.
And this is it, I think one of the things that people kind of feel like, I don't know, maybe this is my perception, but I've seen a lot of comments around this sort of perception that if you have a mobility aid, it's something that you use all the time. But of course, that's markedly not true, like you say. And, I always think if you're in a situation where you're having good days, great, but if you don't have that preparation, when the bad day comes, you're like, well, now I've just got to stop life and I've just got to wait until I've got a good day again then. I mean, for NF2 specifically, there are so many different issues that people with NF2 experience. And one of the common things that I'm thinking mobility-wise is around drop foot or nerve issues. And I mean, drop foot is probably a bit more predominant because neuropathy is not one of the most common factors of NF2, but drop foot is there for a lot of NF2 patients. I mean, what sort of thing could an occupational therapist support with that?
So part of it might be around working out in what way the drop foot is impacting your life. So if you are sat on a sofa with your laptop on and you're watching Netflix, it's not going to be too much of a problem. If you're attempting to go rock climbing, it might be significantly more of a problem. So it may be that what you need are a series of solutions for different activities. So it may be that you've got trekking poles if you're on uneven ground. It may be that we look at walking boots rather than shoes. It may be that splinting is appropriate, or strapping tape. It might be about teaching strapping tape techniques so that you're not dependent on somebody else wrapping tape around you whenever you need to get out and about. It may be that there is a way to start integrating physiotherapy into your daily life so that it's not so much of a chore. It may be about adapting a vehicle, or just looking at ways in which actually you can reduce the amount of concentration required to get around. So part of my job is as a conference speaker. Most of this is done via video chat, but on the rare occasions I actually have to leave my house to go to work, I almost always go in my wheelchair. If I'm sat down, 100% of my cognitive function, my concentration, my brain power is directed towards me doing my job. If I'm stood up, the vast majority of my brain power is directed to not falling on my face in front of a room full of strangers. So my ability to do my job is improved by me being sat down. So sometimes mobility aids aren't for people who can't walk or aren't for people who can't get from A to B. It's for people that could probably manage it, but it's really difficult. So having those options available can be life-changing.
And it's a really good point, actually, because you think, on the logical side of things, if there's a solution to help you do better, why wouldn't you take a solution, And you use rock climbing as an example, in the past I've done lots of rock climbing and drop foot has been an issue for me, particularly around sensory changes in my feet, not being able to feel where the rocks are, where the holds are, and then also not having that same ability to move in that way. And I actually went a slanting direction, and honestly I can't even tell you how much of a difference it's made. And even just something as simple as the walking boot or the trekking poles, and these are actually, recently I moved to North Wales and everything's outdoors, everything's rugged, and I can't any longer just use flip-flops, or just sort of normal shoes. I have to use solid shoes. I have to use these trekking poles. And it's not a case of, I won't manage it if I don't use it. It's just, like you say, it makes it 10 times harder. So actually then I'm not really enjoying what I'm doing. I'm going out until I got this mountain range area and I'm not looking at the mountains because I'm staring at my feet. So it becomes this kind of logic thing. If there's a solution there that can help you enjoy life better, then you take it, you know. I think one of the things I've seen lots of OTs talk about, and something that's sort of I'm learning a little bit myself as well, is around body awareness. And I don't know if that's the technical term for it, but if there is a technical term for it, can you tell us? And can you explain what's important about body awareness and how people can sort of improve their understanding of learning what their bodies are telling them?
So one of the words I talk about regularly with my clients is proprioception. Proprioception is your ability to understand where your body is in relation to the rest of your body, but also to your environment. So we use proprioception for things like walking through a door frame without bouncing off the sides, or being able to step down a curb without ending up laying in the road. For a lot of people, proprioception can be a bit of a problem. So active balance, proprioception, body awareness, our ability to carry out movement tasks, is composed of a lot of different elements. And that includes things like your inner ear function, your eyesight, your blood pressure, your touch, senses of touch, your own body awareness, your nerve function. For a lot of people with complex conditions that affect a lot of systems, they can end up with a little bit of a problem with a lot of different areas. So there's no one element of proprioception where they go, wow, I definitely can't do that. But there's a little bit of a problem with all of them. And when you add up all of those little problems, what you get is a significant impairment with your ability to do stuff, but without a unifying diagnosis or reason why. So it is quite common to struggle with that. The other thing being that, and I see this a lot, if you're in pain quite a lot of the time, or you're fatigued quite a lot of the time, or your body generally sends you a lot of unpleasant sensory information a lot of the time, you learn to ignore everything your body tells you, because if you stopped the first time something hurt, you would never get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
What happens is we get too good at that. So we start to ignore things we shouldn't be ignoring. So I'll meet and I'll talk to people who've had horrendous acute injuries and have just tried to walk it off because they're so used to ignoring sensory input that they're happy to just carry on, ignore and override. The problem with this is that the recovery from that acute stuff, the fixable stuff, is then so much worse. So using headaches as an example, if you've got a little bit of a headache, often a drink, 5 minutes of fresh air, 10 minutes away from a screen is enough to get rid of it. If you've got a little bit of a headache and you spend 4 hours squinting at a computer screen and not moving from your desk, you're then looking at painkillers and 4 hours in a darkened room to recover. So the more efficient way to look at things is to be proactive, not reactive. So with the body awareness stuff, you have to strike a really difficult balance of actually ignoring some of the chronic stuff so that you can get on with your life, but recognizing your symptoms enough that they're not actually getting worse from the minute you get out of bed in the morning. On top of that, for people with NF2, what you're looking at are, actual nerve damage scenarios where you don't have the sensory input. Your body physically cannot tell where bits of it is, or can't actually process information that's occurring. So that really increases your risk of injury, because if you're not aware of your body, tripping over yourself becomes much, much easier. Walking into stuff becomes much easier. Misjudging steps becomes easier. So a lot of the time when I'm working with people who've got poor proprioception, it's about finding ways to mitigate the damage effectively. And it may be something like compression clothing. So even just sports compression stuff is designed to improve your proprioception. It's designed to improve your balance, and it's designed to give you better body awareness. That's why athletes find it so useful. So for somebody with really rubbish proprioception, adding compression can give their body a little bit more of an idea of where they actually are. It's like when you walk into a shopping centre and they've got a big map with a "You are here" sticker on it. The "you are here" sticker is proprioception. It tells your body where it is to start with. If you don't know where you're starting, it's very hard to achieve a movement without walking into everything around you. If you know where you're starting, and that's what the compression does, it gives you the "you are here" sticker. It's much easier to map your way through a movement without getting injured. Mobility aids can also be really useful. I have met, spoken to, and I'm probably one of these myself, but there are a lot of people who find rock climbing easier than walking. Because when you're climbing, you are taught from the very beginning to have 3 points of contact as often as you can. When you're walking and you take a step forwards, for a short period of time, you have 1 point of contact with the ground. And it's really hard to orient yourself to your environment if you've got 1 point of contact. Whereas stick somebody on a climbing wall and they've got at absolute least 2 points of contact, the proprioception becomes that much more efficient. You know where you are. So mobility aids from this perspective give you another point of contact, meaning that you end up knowing where you are better. I'm one of those people, for various reasons, that has a little bit of a problem with a whole lot of different systems in my body. My night vision is not great. So a couple of years ago, I had some training to use a long white stick from my local sight loss charity. And this was after a lot of, oh, well, I'm not blind enough, and do I deserve it, and is it appropriate, dithering from me. But when I finally tried it, I was really shocked to realize that my proprioception is better when I'm using my cane.
Oh.
It's not just my eyesight. So when I'm using my white stick, I can walk, look up, make eye contact with another person and have a conversation with them without falling over or drifting towards the person I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Take the stick away, even in optimal lighting conditions, and I can't do that anymore. So sometimes having an unconventional solution mobility wise can have benefits that you weren't necessarily prepared for originally.
I think this is one of those things as well, because, you know, I can pretty much guarantee that people will be watching this going, oh my God, I can't walk in the dark, or I can't look rude as I'm walking along, you know. For people with NF2, I mean, the hallmark of the condition is tremors that grow in your hearing nerve. And of course, that is directly related to the vestibular system. And I think in the sort of NF2 world, we use bad balance and bad proprioception actually interchangeably, and they're similar but not the same necessarily. And I think when people talk about the symptoms of bad balance that they're experiencing, actually they're talking about their proprioception there. And so I mean, any of my friends with NF2, you know, we've all joked about walking into the doors and all those things that you've described, and you know, lots of people struggling in low lights and being able to look at things and walk at the same time, because you've got to look at your feet, where your feet go, and you've got to be thinking about a million and one different things going on there. And I think what you said there just really hit the nail on the head for me, because how would anybody think, oh, maybe a white cane might help me with those things, you know, unless you've got some intervention that can say, well, this might be a solution for you. And I think what I really love about everything that you've described so far is I think a little bit, well, from my view, a little bit unique to lots of medical professionals, because usually people want to find out the why, and actually it kind of seems, correct me if this is inaccurate, but it kind of seems almost like you look at the person and all the things going on, and actually it doesn't really matter what's caused it. You're looking at how to help with solutions for all the things that it's affecting almost. Is that accurate?
Yeah, you're completely spot on. I've told clients this before when they're kind of hesitant about working with me before seeing a consultant, that diagnosis is completely irrelevant to me. A decent chunk of my client base doesn't have a diagnosis. They just have a whole lot of medically unexplained symptoms. So they've gone through years and years of testing, but nobody's been able to go, you have this, it's caused by X, Y, Z, here's what we're going to do about it. And in the meantime, what they're left with is just being told to get on with things. which is a lot easier said than done. So I've worked with quite a few people who actually don't have any idea what's causing their symptoms. But the fact that they have those symptoms means that we can work out what the problem is and try and find a solution for that specific activity.
And that's kind of all encompassing, really, isn't it? Because actually, you don't need to be a neurosurgeon to be able to help improve somebody's life with neuropathy, or to be, an ophthalmologist to help someone guide around their house, and I think that's such the brilliant thing about it, because it's almost like, well, which part of you's not working properly? Right, let's look at the solutions we've got for that. And I think one of the things that shocked me a little bit, well, shock's probably a bit of a strong word, but until about 12 months ago, I had absolutely no idea that OTs also work in mental health. And so I was curious as to how OTs operate in that arena.
OTs are one of the very, very few healthcare professionals who come out of university equally well trained in physical and mental health. So wow. What happens, you don't specialise until after you qualify. Some of us don't specialise at all. Although most of my clients have some kind of physical diagnosis, the vast majority of them will or have had at some point some kind of mental health challenge. I'm not going to sit there and say, I can't talk to you about anxiety because we're supposed to be talking about fatigue. I don't draw a line between physical and mental health. Everyone has both, and they are so intrinsically linked that it's impossible to box them up separately. You often see people with chronic pain diagnoses who are also diagnosed with depression and anxiety. But from my perspective, I don't know if that's always an accurate diagnosis. If you are in horrendous pain 24 hours a day, you've lost your job, you've lost access to your friends, you can't walk your dog, you're arguing with your partner because you haven't been able to be intimate in months or years, the house is a mess and you're tired and you're financially concerned you're about to lose your home, the appropriate mental health state to be in relation to those situations is not good. If you come to me in that situation going, no, it's great, I'm perfectly happy, then I would be concerned. You know?
And I think that's one of the things, isn't it? Because, when you go to your doctor, or, if you've seen in our clinical teams, the two things are treated very differently. And, you aren't automatically offered support for mental health issues, but you were automatically given support for physical health issues and clinical health issues. And, the mental health is always a sort of add-on side of things. And I didn't know that either about, OTs essentially being equally trained in both sides of things when you're fresh out.
I genuinely think one of the stupidest things healthcare ever did was separate physical and mental health. If you look at the impact each has on the other, there is no way to draw a line between them. Taking stress as an example, if you put yourself in a stressful situation for an extended period of time, stress has some really, really awful impacts on your body in a physical sense. Everything from losing your hair to irritable bowel, to high blood pressure, to inability to sleep, increase in pain symptoms from stress, depression from long-term stress. All of these things have a physical impact as well as a mental health one. If you have a physical condition that's severely limiting your ability to engage with your life, it is natural to not feel great about that from a mental health perspective. So when I work with clients who've got complex conditions and overlapping symptoms, for me, it's all one and the same. If we work on fatigue management and maybe you're making better use of your energy, and maybe you can start doing hobbies and seeing friends for the first time in 6 months, and you're not completely exhausted from work so that you actually have time for a social life, maybe that has a positive impact on your mental health as well. If we're looking at how we can adapt gardening to make it possible again, and you get to re-engage with an activity that used to bring you endless amounts of joy, the mental health benefits of being outside and getting your hands dirty in the soil are going to be massive. So I really don't like drawing a line between the two. But obviously, you know, for a lot of services, that is the realistic way that things work. From a purely mental health perspective, a lot of things like sticking to a routine can be really, really difficult. Motivating yourself to get up and get going can be really difficult. So a lot of the OT skills involve grading exercises to the point where you can start to make things seem possible again. You can break it down into more manageable pieces, or you can find ways to actually start making a task less daunting and less exhausting, so that you can just do a little bit. And once you've done a little bit, that kind of reinforces that doing this thing isn't so much of a problem. So you get these little wins and these little successes, and you have practice runs at things and trial runs at things. And the more successes you have, the more confident you are with bigger changes. And then you start making bigger changes, and all of a sudden you've managed to reverse that downward spiral into an upward spiral. Obviously, easier said than done. But again, you know, starting small, celebrating the little victories is the same thing I do with physical or mental health situations.
And this is it, you know, and I think sometimes we quite often almost invalidate ourselves a little bit when we have these sort of small improvements, and we think, oh, it hasn't been this huge change, it's not good enough, you know. But actually, you know, going at that sort of attitude that any change, any improvement is a celebration. Do you have to work a lot around client expectations with that?
Definitely, but also it's worth pointing out that sometimes no change at all is still worthy of a celebration.
Yes.
So if you have a condition where your body periodically develops new symptoms in ways that messes with your ability to do anything, and is sometimes classed as a medical emergency, you being able to create a plateau where you've stayed the same for 6 months or a year or 2 years is a huge success. Sometimes just a slower decline is a huge success. So I think it's very, very difficult to start celebrating the little victories unless you start analysing all the little tiny bits that you're doing. One of the things a lot of people struggle with is feeling like they're not doing anything, like they're not engaged. Like if you don't work full-time and have a family and study full-time, suddenly you're not coping as a human. But what I often get people to do is make a list of every single thing they do on a weekly basis in order to stay healthy. And then I ask them one very simple question. If you stopped doing all of those things, stopped exercising, stopped eating healthy, stopped taking your medication, stopped seeing your specialists, how long would it be before you ended up in hospital? Yeah. And the answer is normally depressingly short, which, you know, reinforces the fact that for everyone with a pre-existing condition, your full-time job is being healthy. If you are managing to work part-time or volunteer or have a hobby or raise a family on top of that, you're a superhero. And
I think it's this kind of cultural thing that we have, isn't it? You know, we celebrate almost people overworking themselves, don't we? And so I think, you know, I know, particularly in my experience, you know, I've had a big adjustment in my life over the last sort of 3 years or so, and I've gone from, you know, running fairly big organizations and to now, you know, working in part-time, because realizing the stress that has any impact on my physical health was just, it just became a priority for me, actually, for me to find that balance, because as you say, it takes a lot of time managing health, and it's not like I frequent the hospital for hospital appointments every week or every month. It's not that. It's that, like you say, it's the small things, to eat well, to eat, you know, fresh foods and all these things, because that takes time to repair. My body works a little slower, so it takes me a little longer than maybe, you know, some supersonic speeded person. I don't know what these normal humans are like now, you know, but that's sort of accounting into my expectations that actually these things take time, and to build and prioritize that time in. Is that something that a lot of your clients experience?
Definitely. And what you just said there about like how regular humans work, I think if you've been chronically ill, or you've been living with a condition for a really long time, it's easy to lose sight of how easy things are for healthy people. I was 19 when I realized that most people can walk without looking at their feet. So I'd grown up with everyone thinking I was really moody and antisocial because I wouldn't wave at friends on the other side of the road. But the actual answer was that I hadn't seen them because I was concentrating so hard on not falling over. So when I'm trying that hard not to fall over and trying not to cut myself with my super sharp knives in the kitchen and trying to keep an eye on boiling water, there's a certain amount of fatigue that I think we've all come to accept but not recognize. So it's become our normal to be a little bit exhausted most of the time, but without recognizing that actually we're working considerably harder than people that don't have the same conditions. My partner is one of those really weird, fit and healthy people who runs obstacle races for fun and does parkour and jumps off roofs. And, and that's how we met, because back in the day, that's what I used to do as well. So after his first ever obstacle race thing, he came home, muddy up to his neck. He'd leapt over fire, swum through ice cubes, been electrocuted, all in the name of fun. He fell asleep face down in a pizza box. And the next day couldn't get off the loo without using my grab rails. So he'd done something that pushed his body to the limit and then spent 3 weeks recovering.
Yeah.
We do this on a regular basis. We push our bodies to the limit to get everyday tasks done, but we don't have the same leniency when it comes to recovery time. We just expect ourselves to be up and running again the next day. Even healthy people factor recovery time in. It's just that the thing they did in order to achieve the need for recovery time was a little bit more intense.
So it might be that, your partner's massive obstacle race is, say, us like, I don't know, walking around the park or something such like it. It's just that having that understanding of what your limits are, really, isn't it? And I think from my experience, because, I've worked with you and I've worked with other OTs as well, and every single OT that I've worked with has supported me in extremely different ways. So my first experience with an OT was it was when I had my very first surgery. So I was paralyzed for a little while. I had to learn to walk again, and so it was about how to manage walking around the house. And it was like you were mentioning earlier, the grab rails, things like that, things for the bathroom. And I think as a young person, because I was like 19 at the time, I had a great deal of benefit from those things once I was still recovering in my mind. And then I thought, I'm recovering now, I don't need those things anymore. And I think I had this perception, because as a society, I think when we think about mobility aids, that we think about older people, and there's this kind of oh, that's not me, almost like this denial and rejection of needing those assistances, and I think so many young people, young adults watching this may relate to that also. And I mean, what advice could you give to people who maybe would really benefit from those but are reluctant to do so?
Mobility aids, particularly wheelchairs, I found are a real sticking point for a lot of people. I think the real turning point will be the first time you use one and you look around and you think, is this how easy it's supposed to be? The first time I got a wheelchair, I was 21. 3 years previous to that, had been an outdoor adventure instructor. So I'd had quite a swift decline in my functioning. When I got my first wheelchair, one of the first things I did was go around Sainsbury's. And I was shocked to discover that I didn't hate shopping. I actually was just so exhausted doing it standing up that I'd learned to hate it. And when I got rid of that fatigue and that pain and that level of concentration required not to just fall into the freezer aisle and lay down, suddenly the whole activity changed. And I was like, wow, I understand why people like going shopping now. I get it. It was like completely earth-shattering. I don't know, groundbreaking for me. a good friend of mine I met at a hypermobility syndromes sort of residential weekend was the one that explained this to me, was that, you know, mobility aids don't have to be for constant use. And actually, it may be that if there's something you really, really, really want to do, using a mobility aid for the stuff earlier in the day that you don't care so much about means that you can do the fun thing later in the day. I think often when we're making decisions, we minimize things down to how tired am I going to be? How difficult is it? And how much is it going to hurt? And actually, it doesn't have to be that simple. Sometimes you just really need to see friends or family, or you really need a laugh, or you really want to go dancing. Having a mobility aid means that even if you can't function in a way that you would need to do it without the mobility aid, you can still do it. I also think colour schemes and personality are super important. The NHS, for budgetary reasons, provides mobility aids in usually one of three colours: beige, grey, or navy blue. Personally, those colours do not match my personality in any way, shape, or form. So my crutches are zebra print. My first ever wheelchair was neon orange. You know, my leg braces, I've got knee braces, they came in black. I immediately painted them with holographic glitter nail varnish. So now I've got holographic sparkle knee braces. Often having mobility aids represent you, having a little bit of your personality in them, makes it so much more acceptable. You know, I've got a walking stick with flames around the bottom. It's just a black stick with flame stickers around the base. I know people who've got walking sticks that match their outfits. They went for like 5 colours and now they can just pick and choose a stick to go with whatever they're wearing during the day. I have seen crutches that are entirely decorated in rhinestones from head to toe. I've seen rainbow colours, skull print. Basically, if you want a mobility aid and you have a colour scheme in mind, message me and I will find you a supplier. It's so much easier to have assistive tech be part of you, part of your personality, part of your life, than it is to have something that doesn't match or represent you in any way given to you. And yes, it makes your life easier, but that level of self-consciousness about having it with you is really hard to overcome.
And I think it's really important as well, you know, particularly for, you know, young adults, almost thinking of it in terms of like, I don't know, like a fashion accessory or something such like. It kind of feels like a more of an extension of yourself, doesn't it? I mean, I know when my family were living in central London and I lived there for about a year, I think it was. And of course, you know, anyone that's been to central London knows how exhausting it is walking around, going on the underground. You know, not all the stations have lifts or any of the, you know, escalators or anything like that. So it can be really freaking exhausting. And then add on the fact that you've got to watch out for people. You have to try and watch your feet, what they're doing at the same time. And it was funny because an OT that I was seeing at the time said to me, well, why don't you use crutches or a walking stick? And I said, well, I don't need them. And she said, well, that's not the point. Why don't you try it as you're walking through central London and see if it's better for you? Yeah, there was like this magic space around me, because as soon as I had a walking stick or crutches, people moved out of my way. And what that meant is I could actually focus on what I was doing. I could concentrate better. My walking, I wouldn't say it was significantly better, but I enabled that sort of focused space around me so that I wasn't then having to worry about people looking into me. And I think one of the points I just wanted to touch on was about kind of, well, pacing, I guess, really, about using sort of mobility aids and assistive tech as a way of helping face yourself, because that's, you know, that's another example just there. If I had not had those mobility aids walking through central London, that was my entire evening out. You know, walking back from work, that's it. I sit down on the sofa, I can't move. You know what I mean? So I think it's a really important point that you bring up of how actually it can prolong your day, it can prolong your energy as well. And I know we're running a little bit out of time here, so just quickly before we finish up, if there's someone watching that's never used an OT before, maybe is kind of like, oh, well, I might benefit, what sort of top tips or advice would you have for them about working with an OT and getting the most out of it?
Prioritization is always a good one. If that, you don't have to have a solution, but knowing what your challenges are when you go in is really good. So I often ask people what their goals are or what their aims are for working with me. So, you know, what is it that you want to get out of the session? If you are really struggling to ride your horse, name that. If you're really struggling to roll over in bed, name that. If you are really struggling to work around your kitchen, say that. List everything that's a problem, even if it's not a problem all of the time, because I think that's something we do to ourselves. You know, as disabled people, we have a tendency to go, well, I can do it some of the time, so it's fine. Is it though? You know, do you actually need to struggle half the time if you could just have a solution and then only use it when you need it? So going in prepared with a list of things that are currently difficult is a really sensible thing to do. I think often OTs are quite kind of creative around things, but actually with rarer conditions they may not have heard of before. Ask around support groups, speak to other people that live with similar conditions. They may well have found solutions with years of experimentation behind them that an OT just wouldn't think of because they haven't got the background knowledge on your condition. And I'm saying that as an OT, but also somebody with a rare condition. So it's okay to go in with ideas, but it's also okay to go in with solutions and just say, how do I get this thing? 20 of my friends have tried it and it's been life-changing. I think in terms of OTs, often there are specialist OTs in different departments as well. So it may be that if you are seeing a consultant for whatever reason, they may well have OTs associated with their department that work in that specific area. So it may be that there are sight loss OTs or hearing loss OTs or you know, OTs who specialize in balance disorders affiliated with all the departments you're currently already under. It's just that nobody's thought to give you an appointment with one yet. So asking for an OT appointment can be really sensible. There may also be private services in and around your area. So just Googling your postcode and occupational therapy can be really useful. You know, if you are really struggling, you can always drop me a message. I'm linked in with a lot of different OT communities. If I can't help, I'm happy to help people find a local OT.
Brilliant stuff. Wow. Well, thank you so much for that, Jo. I think we covered so much there as well. And thank you for that comment about answering questions as well. What I'll do in the description link below somewhere, we'll put a link to your Facebook page and also to your website. So if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with Jo. She's like the friendliest person on earth, and she literally has had a solution for every single thing that I've been experienced difficulty with. And that's us out of time. So again, thank you so much, Jo. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I love doing stuff like this. So thank you for having me.
Brilliant stuff. All right, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget, if you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, also check out some of the other videos that we've got on YouTube as well. We've got loads stacked up there now. And until next time, stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.